Trevor the traction engine was enjoying his work in the vicarage orchard. Birds were singing and apples were ripening on the trees. It was a lovely day.
Hello, Trevor, said James. You look as bright and cheerful as my red paint.
Oh, I am, replied Trevor.
What's that noise?
It's the bees, laughed Trevor. They're all in these boxy things called beehives. I'm taking them to the station. The vicar says his bees make good honey, and he's giving some of them to his friends. Just then, Boko, the diesel engine, hummed in.
Take care, you two. Don't make the bees angry. They might sting you.
James didn't like being told what to do by a diesel, and he buzzed away.
Goodbye, Trevor,
called Boko, and set off to see Duck at the next station. Bill and Ben, the tank engine twins, were busy arranging cars, but they scampered off when they saw Boko.
I remember the first time I met those two, laughed Boko. They nearly made my eyes pop out. Edward soon put a stop to their games.
Edward is the only one who can keep Bill and Ben in order, chuckled Duck. I sometimes call them the bees.
A good name, replied Boko. They're terrors when they start buzzing around.
James bustled in.
What's that, Duck? Are you afraid of bees? They're only insects after all, so don't let that buzzbox diesel tell you different.
His name is Boko, and he didn't.
I wouldn't care if hundreds were swarming around. I'd just blow smoke and make them buzz off.
Buzz, 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 retorted Duck. The next morning, James arrived at the station to collect his coaches. The passengers were excited and keen to get on board. The platform was crowded, and the porter was in a hurry.
Mind your backs, he shouted.
Then there was trouble. The beehive fell and broke open. The station cleared like magic. James heard a familiar buzzing. The bees were too cold to be cross, so they buzzed around the fireman, hoping he'd mend their hive. But he didn't understand, nor did his driver, so the bees turned to James. His boiler was nice and warm.
Buzz off, hissed
James. One bee burnt his foot.
Ooh, ooh.
The bee thought James had burnt him on purpose. So it stung James right back on the nose.
Eee!
Whistled James. He had had enough. So had his fireman and driver. They didn't notice till too late that they had left all their coaches behind. They tried everything to get rid of the bees. First, they spun on the turntable, but to no avail. They tried washing them off, but the bees clung harder to James's warm boiler. Then they tried smoking them off by going through a long tunnel, but still the bees wouldn't go away.
It's no good, James, said his driver. We'll just have to go back to the orchard and fetch another hive.
James's reply was drowned by the sound of buzzing. The vicar was waiting anxiously for James. When he arrived, the bees swarmed straight into their new home.
Come on, James, said his driver. What you need now is a good hose down.
Later that evening, James was resting in the shed when the vicar came to see him.
Thank you for saving my bees, he said. It's a pity it's not Christmas. Then we could call you James the Red-Nosed Engine.
Everyone laughed, even James. But instead, they decided to call James the Bee's Knees, which means they thought he was more useful than ever. Bill and Ben are the most mischievous engines working on Sir Topham Hatt's railway. They're kept busy pushing and pulling cars up and down the line that runs from the China Clay Works to the harbor yard. They like to have fun together and often play tricks on the workmen. But sometimes their teasing ways can get them into trouble. One morning, Sir Topham Hatt came to see them. Important goods have arrived in the big yard. Bill and Ben, I need you to help the other engines. Oh, yes, of course, sir, replied the twins. They set off happily on their important mission. Boko was resting in the yard when suddenly he heard a pair of familiar whistles. Sighed Boko. Here comes trouble. Sir Topham Hatt told us you were tired, teased Bill. He asked us to take all your cars for you. You two never stop, do you? But I'm wise to your pranks, and we do need help here. The twins were soon busy pushing and pulling the heavy cars into place. At last, the day's work was done. The twins now became excited. They were going to use the turntable for the first time. Bill went first. This is fun, he shrieked to Ben. He didn't want to move off at all. The foreman stopped the turntable. Please make way for the other engines, he ordered. Bill did so, but the foreman had accidentally stopped the turntable in the wrong place. Bill was on the wrong track, and there was Ben puffing directly toward him. The engines came to a grinding halt. They gazed grimly at each other. I was here first, said Bill. But you're in my way, protested Ben. You'll have to back up again. I won't. You will. I won't. Sir Topham Hatt came to stop the noise. If you don't behave, I shall not allow you here again. The next day, Ben was still grumpy. That Bill, imagine getting in my way on the turntable. He's a really silly engine. The way I heard it, sighed Boko, it sounded like you were both to blame. You must have heard it all wrong. The twins grumbled about each other all day. Even kind Edward lost patience. All this grumbling spreads bad atmosphere in the yard. You're quite right, and that's why I've come up with a plan. Boko whispered his plan to Edward. Then his driver told Sir Topham Hatt, I'll start making arrangements right away. The next morning, he called Bill and Ben into the yard. Boko is taking a special train to the harbor. His regular heavy goods train is waiting on the siding. You can pull it together. But, protested Bill and Ben, who were still not speaking to each other. Good. I knew I could rely on you two. I'll take the train myself, huffed Ben. Go right ahead, said Bill. Ben was coupled up to the train of freight cars, but they were too heavy for him to move alone. Go on, teased Bill. I can't, said Ben. Then suddenly both twins laughed. I don't think we'll take turns this time, Ben, said Bill. I think we'd better pull together. Ben was delighted. It was good to be helping each other. Best of all, it was good to be friends again. One morning, Edward was waiting to pick up passengers from Thomas's train. Beep, beep. We're late. Where is Thomas? He doesn't usually make us wait. Oh, dear, what can the matter be? Sang the fireman. Johnny's so long, and never you mind about Johnny, laughed the driver. Just you climb on the cab and look for Thomas. Can you see him? No, replied the fireman. There's Bertie Buss in a tearing hurry. No need to bother with him, though. Likely he's on a coach tour or something. He clambered down. Stop! Stop! I've got Thomas's passengers, wailed Bertie, roaring up to the gates. It was no good. Edward was gone. Bother, said Bertie. Bother Thomas's fireman not coming to work today. Why did I promise to help the passengers catch the train? That will do, Bertie, said his driver. A promise is a promise, and we must keep it. I'll catch Edward or bust, said Bertie. Oh, my gears and axles, he groaned, toiling up the hill. I'll never be the same bus again. Hooray, hooray, I see him, cheered Bertie as he reached the top. Oh, no, Edward's at the station. No, he stopped at a crossing. Hooray, hooray. Bertie tore down the hill. Well done, Bertie, shouted his passengers. Go it. Bertie skidded into the yard. Wait, wait, cried Bertie. He was just in time to see Edward puff away. I'm sorry, said Bertie. Never mind, said the passengers. After him quickly. Third time lucky, you know. Do you think we'll catch him at the next station, driver? There's a good chance, replied the driver. Our road keeps close to the line, and we can climb hills better than Edward. I'll just make sure. He spoke to the station master. Bertie and the passengers waited impatiently. Yes, we'll do it this time, said the driver. Hooray! Called the passengers as Bertie chased after Edward once more. This hill is too steep. This hill is too steep, grumbled the coaches as Edward snorted in front. They reached the top at last and ran smoothly into the station. Beep, whistled Edward. Get in quickly, please. The conductor blew the whistle, and Edward's driver looked back, but the flag didn't wave. Then he heard Bertie. Everything seemed to happen at once, and the station master told the conductor and driver what had happened. I'm sorry about the chase, Bertie, said Edward. My fault, replied Bertie. Late at junction, you didn't know about Thomas's passengers? Beep, beep. Goodbye, Bertie. We're off, whistled Edward. 3 cheers for Bertie, called the passengers. Bertie raced back to tell Thomas that all was well. Thank you, Bertie, for keeping your promise, said Thomas. You're a very good friend indeed. One morning, Bill and Ben were busy at the quarry, pushing and pulling cars filled with clay into their proper places. The twins are cheeky and love playing tricks, but they were growing restless. "Listen, Bill," said Ben, "can you hear something?" "What sort of something?" asked Bill. "Something different," replied Ben. "I can't hear anything different," said Bill. "Exactly," huffed Ben. "Everything is the same. Sounds the same, looks the same. What we need is a surprise." "Surprise what?" asked Bill. Before Ben could answer, the quarry master arrived. "I have just received a message from Sir Topham Hatt. He wants you to go to the station at the harbor." "I wonder what we've done wrong this time," said Bill anxiously. "It must be you," replied Ben. "Why me?" exclaimed Bill. "I've not done anything."
Edward is taking the children on a special trip today. I want you to go to the station and look after cars there.
"We'll do our best, sir," said the twins. Gordon spoke severely to them.
"You must behave here. You're on the main line now."
"Actually, Gordon," giggled Ben, "when we saw you, we thought this was the scrapyard." Gordon was cross.
"Just make sure that my coaches are ready for my evening train."
And he fumed away. The twins laughed and set to work. "This is easy," they said to each other. "We know all about cars." But I'm afraid they didn't. "No need for that," shouted the cars as the twins pushed them into place. "We'll show you around. We want to help." "Thank you very much," said Bill and Ben. The cars giggled and began their tricks. Evening came. The yard was in a dreadful muddle. The twins had let the cars tell them where to put things. Gordon and the passengers waited impatiently outside the station while Bill and Ben tried to sort things out. But by the time Gordon was able to leave, it was very late indeed. Next day, the twins were working at the quarry again. "That's a strange noise," gasped Bill. "I've never heard a noise like that before." "I have," whispered his driver nervously.
It sounds like a rock slide to me."
Then came the alarm. "Danger! Clear the quarry!" shouted the quarry master. Workmen scrambled into the cars. "Thank goodness we're here," said the twins. They were just puffing out of the quarry when, "Help! Wait for me!" A workman had been left behind. Ben waited as the man climbed quickly aboard. The twins left the quarry just in time. Everyone was safe, but rubble lay all around. "Oh dear," said Bill, "this wasn't our fault. I hope Sir Topham Hatt will understand." And indeed he did. Next day, he arrived with Edward.
"Bill and Ben, you still have a lot to learn about cars, don't you? But you acted quickly and bravely in an emergency. So 3 cheers for Bill and Ben, our heroes. Hip, hip, hooray! Hooray! Hooray!"
"Oh, thank you, sir," said Bill. "Being called heroes, well, it's a really nice surprise," laughed Ben. It was a special holiday on the island of Sodor. Bertie the bus was working harder than ever before. All the engines were busy too. Duck was waiting for his next journey. Near him stood a red bus, but he didn't look friendly like Bertie. The bus growled as he gazed at the happy passengers.
Stupid nonsense, he grumbled. I wouldn't have brought them if I'd known. I'd have had a breakdown or something.
I'm glad you didn't, smiled Duck. You'd have spoiled their fun.
Bah! Enjoyment is all you engines live for. One day railways will be ripped up.
Duck felt shocked at such an idea. We have a friend called Bertie, and he's a bus, but he likes the railway. Sometimes he teases us about it, but he'd never want to see it ripped up.
Ha! Growled the bus. I know Bertie. He's too small in size to be of any use.
Duck took no notice. That bus is silly, he thought, as he steamed away. At the junction, Duck told Oliver all about him.
I call him Bulgy,
chuckled Oliver, and then he puffed happily away. But that afternoon, when the two engines met again, Oliver was no longer laughing.
Bulgy's friend has come, he said. He's rude, too. He's taking Bulgy's passengers home and leaving Bulgy free to steal ours.
But he can't, objected Duck.
Bulgy says he can get them to the big station before us.
Rubbish, replied Duck. It's much farther by road.
Yeah, continued Oliver, but Bulgy says he knows a shortcut.
That evening, the engines were preparing for the homeward rush. Where are the passengers, they wondered.
Look,
shrilled Oliver.
Look at Bulgy. He's a mean scarlet deceiver.
Bulgy was wearing a large sign saying, Railway Bus.
Yeah, boo snubs, he
jeered as he roared away. Come on, puffed Duck to his coaches. Let's see what he's up to. Duck wanted to get back at Bulgy, but he wasn't sure how. Then, in the distance, Duck saw a man waving a red flag. That meant danger. The line here crosses a narrow road, and there was Bulgy, wedged firmly under the bridge. So this was his shortcut, chuckled Duck. He tricked us, shouted Bulgy's passengers. He said he was a railway bus, but he wouldn't accept our return tickets. He wanted us to think railways are no good. Duck's crew examined the bridge.
It's risky, but we must help the passengers.
Passengers are urgent, agreed Duck. Duck slowly and carefully set off across the bridge. Bulgy wailed as he felt the bridge quiver.
Oh! Oh! Stop! He shouted. It might fall on me.
That would serve you right for telling lies, said Duck. But the bridge didn't collapse. Duck made good time, and all the passengers caught their trains. The bridge is now mended, but not, unfortunately, Bulgy and his ways. He never learned sense. He's a hen house now, and his lies can do no harm. The hens never listen to them anyway. Thomas's branch line is important, and so is Edward's. But their track and bridges are not so strong as those on the main line. Sir Topham Hatt does not allow the heavier main line engines like Gordon to run on them. But one day, the way Gordon was talking, you would have thought Sir Topham Hatt had given this order for quite another reason.
It's not fair,
grumbled Gordon. What isn't fair? Asked Edward.
letting branch line diesels pull main line trains.
Never mind, Gordon. I'm sure Boko will let you pull his freight cars sometimes.
Gordon spluttered. I won't pull Boko's dirty cars. I won't run on branch lines.
Why not? It would be a nice change.
Sir Topham Hatt would never approve, huffed Gordon. Branch lines are vulgar.
Gordon puffed away. Edward chuckled and followed him to the station. Every evening, the two engines pull two fast trains from the station. Gordon always leaves first with an express for the main line. Edward follows 5 minutes later with his train for the branch line. Usually, everything runs like clockwork, but tonight there was trouble. A lady in a green floppy hat was saying goodbye to a friend. It was nearly time for Gordon to start. The fireman looked back towards the conductor's van and saw something green waving.
Right away, mate.
He thought the conductor had waved his flag. Gordon started, leaving luggage, his passengers, and the conductor all standing on the platform. Everyone was very surprised and cross. To make matters worse, by the time Gordon had been stopped and brought back, Edward was already late with his train. So now he set off first. But the signalman at the junction wasn't told about the change. By mistake, he sent Edward along the main line. Gordon was sent along the branch and arrived cold and cross on one of the sidings near the harbor. Next morning, Bill and Ben peeped into the yard. There were no cars for them, but they didn't mind that. Teasing Gordon would be much better fun.
What's that?
Asked Bill.
Shh,
whispered Ben.
It's Gordon.
It looks like Gordon, but it can't be. Gordon never comes on the branch lines. He thinks them vulgar. Gordon pretended he hadn't heard them.
If it isn't Gordon, said Ben, it's just a pile of old iron, which we'd better take to the scrapyard.
No, Bill, this lot's useless for scrap. We'll take it to the harbor and dump it in the sea. Gordon was alarmed.
I am Gordon. Stop! Stop!
When Boko suddenly arrived, Gordon thought him the most beautiful sight he had ever seen.
Boko, my dear engine, save me!
Boko quickly sized up the situation and threatened to take away the cars he had brought for Bill and Ben. This made the twins behave at once. Gordon thought Boko was wonderful.
Those little demons, how do you do it?
Ah, well, said Boko, it's just a knack. Gordon still believes that Boko saved his life, but we know the twins were only teasing, don't we? It was a splendid morning on the island of Sodor. James was feeling very pleased with himself. His red paint gleamed in the sunshine as he sped along the line. He reached the junction just as Percy puffed in with some freight cars. James was surprised to see him.
What are you doing here, Percy? You should be at the station by now.
I know, sighed Percy. These cars have been troublesome all morning.
That's no excuse, Percy. Nothing should stop us. Sir Topham Hatt relies on us to be on time. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be on my way.
And James puffed importantly away. Bossy buffers, muttered Percy. James arrived at the harbor. It was market day. The harbor yard was filled with the sweet smell of fruit from faraway lands. The fruit was delivered in big ships. James watched as strawberries, oranges, melons, and bananas were carefully loaded onto his cars. Then he set off for the station on the main line. On the way, he met Thomas.
Really reliable. That's me,
Panted James.
Pity the same can't be said for Percy. Goodbye.
What was all that about? Gasped Annie and Clarabelle. That was trouble. Trouble for James. Just wait and see. Percy was back in the yard and busy shunting. He had the cars in good order and was making up for lost time. But the station master had bad news.
What's happened?
Asked Percy's driver.
James's brakes have jammed. We need Percy's help right away.
Percy quickly set off to the rescue. James was stuck on the line and looking glum. Percy couldn't help laughing.
Got yourself in a bit of a jam, eh, James? A sticky situation? Be quiet. It's not funny having jammed brakes.
And not very reliable either. I'm surprised you let it happen, James. Nothing should stop us engines.
That's enough, Percy, said the driver. Can you push these cars?
Of course I can. There's no time to lose. James has done too much of that already. James angrily hissed steam as Percy was coupled to the cars. Off we go, said Percy. I'll have to go fast to get there in time. Those big engines are so unreliable.
Be careful, Percy,
called his driver, but Percy was in a hurry. He didn't see that the switch had failed and that he had been diverted into a siding.
Look out, Percy,
shouted his driver and applied the brakes, but it was too late. The driver and fireman had jumped clear, but squashed fruit squirted all over Percy. Sir Topham Hatt arrived.
Percy, you are not to blame for the switch failure, but I do not run a jam factory.
Yes, sir. No, sir. And Percy squelched sadly away. That night, the shed was silent. James and Percy felt very sorry for themselves. At last, Thomas spoke. You know, he said to no engine in particular, there's more than one way to get jammed. We all learned that today. Still, there was silence. What's more, we also learned that sometimes when engines help each other out of a jam, things can still go wrong. So, said a voice, so that means we learned a lot today, and therefore... Then came a chorus. We're really useful engines after all.
To a land where the skies are blue, a storybook land of wonder, a magical island just waiting for you. Island of Sodor will make your dreams come true. Imagine a place where the sun always smiles, the valleys are green as can be. The friends that you love are all waiting for you. Island of Sodor will make your dreams come true. Children, follow the dream to a land of make-believe. The island of Sodor, magical land where dreams come true.
Follow the road that leads to your dream, over the hills and mountains. Look for the skies with stars in their eyes.
Island of Sodor will make your dreams come true.